combination of return to tradition, the rise of the Klan, the idea of religious fundamentalism, anti sort of city. So we will see the Volstead Act, which is actually the legislative way that you actually sort of activate the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition, and what was called the Noble Experiment to end the sale and manufacture of alcohol was just terribly tough to enforce. And at the end of the day, what you're going to have is being able to get alcohol pretty much just as easily as you could before it was outlawed through speakeasies and bootleggers. And this really gives rise to organized crime syndicates like Al Capone. At the end of the day, it never really gets the public support. And certainly by the time we get into the Depression, you're going to see the 21st Amendment, which actually overrides the 18th. During World War I and through the 20s, we're going to see the great migration of African Americans coming out of the South, something that they really couldn't do, certainly during Reconstruction, didn't necessarily have the resources to do throughout the Gilded Age. But as jobs become more plentiful, as people are going off to war, so women and African Americans tend to be the ones that fill that gap in the factories. You're going to see that in World War I and World War II. You're going to see a movement up to the major cities. You're going to see racial tension and riots actually break out in Chicago, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places. Yet, when we look at the Great Migration, the impact that it has on the cities is that, in many cases, whites move out or move out of the inner city and move to sort of the outer rings or, in fact, the suburbs. Now, one of the places that we see the effect of whites moving out is in Harlem, in New York City. And so the Harlem Renaissance is going to be the first time we sort of see black arts and culture being embraced by a white audience. That is certainly not to say that blacks have not had an artistic heritage going all the way back, but here you're going to see from music, with jazz, with dancing, with poetry, with writing, in addition to the arts that are really flourishing in Harlem. Certainly this black consciousness that we're also going to see with people like Marcus Garvey, who say black-owned businesses are very important to have. In some ways, almost a black like a militancy, but certainly not like we're going to see later on during the Civil Rights era, in an effort to send blacks back to Africa, but really them choosing to go back to Africa as opposed to what we saw way back in the 18 teens with the American Colonization Society. So you see these arts and business emerging. Now, across the pond in Europe, you're going to see a group of writers who are known as the Lost Generation. They're looking at America saying, wait, this return to normalcy is ridiculous. How can you forget all the lives that were lost and all the efforts that could have been made to make America, helping the world progress? And they're looking and they're saying, this is so hollow. The 1920s are just a bunch of George Babbitts running around who essentially have sold their soul to have the newest, whatever it is, alarm clock, water cooler, car, home in the suburbs. And so you're going to see this rejection of what's going on through literature. Obviously, it's interesting that they're doing it from abroad, particularly in Paris. But this whole idea of the lost generation indicates that not everybody is, of course, sold on the Roaring '20s. So when we look back at the 20s, we can certainly focus on all that was new, all that was modern, all that seemed to be booming. Yet at the same time, it's impossible to not ignore all the forces that were trying to make America focus on its past, on its tradition, on its sort of religious fundamentalism, on its rejection of others, be they people that were here already, African Americans, or people that were coming in. So the 1920s really is a product of World War I in terms of pushing forward with science and productivity, and also very much a way of saying, we've been through a war, this was brutal, now it's time to return to normalcy.